Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this encounter for Reimagining Carnival of the Animals. My name is Allison Boles, and I serve as La Jolla Music Society's Director of Learning and Engagement. And I'm so happy to be joined today by two amazing women. First, Francesca Harper here, who is the choreographer and director for this project. And not to embarrass you both too much, but I am going to share a little biographical information. It's brief because their bios are long and very impressive. But Francesca began her professional dance career with the Dance Theater of Harlem. She then danced with Ballet Frankfurt under the direction of William Forsythe. And she's more than a triple threat because she's also a vocalist, playwright, and actor. She's choreographed works for Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, Ailey 2, Dance Theater of Harlem, Hubbard Street 2, and many, many more companies, including her own, the Francesca Harper Project, which she founded in 2005. She currently serves as the artistic director for Ailey 2. Just past her is Chisa Yamaguchi, who is the associate director and creative producer for Carnival of the Animals. She studied Asian American Studies and World Arts and Cultures, then went on to join Diavolo Architecture in Motion as a touring dancer for 10 seasons and taking on administrative roles as well. She currently serves as the producer, agent, and manager with Sozo Artists Incorporated, which is a creative agency founded and led by women of color. Please join me in welcoming them. I also wanted to mention some of the creatives who are not in the room with us today, including Wendy Whalen, who is the dancer for this work. And she's one of the most acclaimed dancers of her generation, and someone who we've actually had the pleasure of presenting at La Jolla Music Society several times. She's counted principal roles in more than 125 ballets in her repertory, and she is the dancer most choreographed in the New York City ballet history. She is currently the associate artistic director of the New York City Ballet, and she was appointed to that position in February of 2019. We are also missing Mark Batmuthi Joseph, who conceived and wrote the project. So these are names that may come up as we go through this conversation, just so that you're aware. And he's not only a spoken word artist and poet, but he also serves as the vice president and artistic director of social impact at the Kennedy Center. And finally, Sugar Vendel, who composed the original music for this project. So a lot of heavy hitters. Chisa, I thought we might start with you. Before we talk about what the audience is going to see on Friday, could you share a little bit about the origin of the project, how you all came together?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of kick it back a little bit further, the project itself actually was conceived from a commission by the National Gallery of Art for Mark Batmuthi Joseph to write poems in response to Carnival of the Animals. I know historically, I think it was Ogden Nash who had been commissioned early on as the first poet to actually respond when Carnival of the Animals was really structured as a kid show, essentially to match the music, and so really took on that theatrical element. And so in his first reimagining was to not just look at the first menagerie of animals that is featured in the composition, but he then expanded and started to bring in animals that were not part of the music itself as part of the challenge, to see what could Carnival of the Animals be for him at that point in his life and his career, and that was in 2018. And so around that time, actually, Wendy Whalen had been venturing more into contemporary dance and had been sort of exiting her career as a principal dancer with City Ballet and started doing other projects, and she joined our agency's roster at that time, and it didn't seem like a natural pairing when we suggested the two of them come together, but ended up being something they were so excited about. And Wendy was just thrilled when she thought of Francesca Harper to come in and choreograph on their bodies, which eventually led to asking her to be the director of the project as well. And so it continues to still be very heavily anchored in Mark's language and the words that he set forward, but really in response when Fran is working with Wendy and her body, and in this stage of their careers. Also, it is a response that feels really reflective of the moment for them and who they want to represent now in this stage of their careers, and especially with Francesca's sort of directorial vision. What we'll be presenting here is a special preview, but we're also kind of still in the incubator. So we're very much exploring and learning and in conversation with you all as the audience as well as we start to look forward to the next few years as we further develop toward our world premiere next year.
And Fran, what has it been like with, the music evolving, the words evolving? How do you choreograph for something that is still in process, or is that sort of what you're used to?
Oh, I'm used to this. Yes, I'm very much used to this. And I think we're all, there's this hybridity that's really exciting that we're exploring. When you talk about, I think something I've always enjoyed as an artist is being able to kind of fluidly travel from dance to music to using my voice and also collaborating with other artists to learn from them. So I think both Wendy and Mark are very much also, they operate and live in the same vein and generate art from the same place. So when we all got together, it was really, there was this symbiosis and this connection and very much a collaborative work. And I think that collaboration for me and opening that up to collaborate is just the transformative experience for all of us. Mm-hmm.
And you had your earliest days of choreographing. Sorry, that's a hard one. With the Alvin Ailey Company. And do you feel like there's any of those early influences that are coming into this work now, or other parts of your career that are influencing your work for this piece?
Oh, yes, everything influences my work. I mean, I think even subconscious memories that I don't know are living and embedded in my brain are infused in the work. Yes, I grew up at Alvin Ailey, so it's really wonderful to be back there now as director for the Ailey Second Company. So yes, I'm very much inspired by Alvin's vision and emotional generosity that I felt was really a part of his work and I feel that both Mark and Wendy are very much, they live, Wendy is very expressive, as you talked about her career and experience. So I think there's a real alignment and compatibility that we all share. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Chisa, maybe you can speak to this as Wendy's manager, kind of. I know she's moving more and more into contemporary dance. What do you think made this project so special to her, and what appealed to her in the early days of it?
I remember Wendy expressing that she hadn't really had an opportunity to work with language in this specific way and really sort of embody the spoken word and see it translated in this form and really become sort of a manifestation of a lot of sort of narrative ideas that I think the way that as dancers we've maybe also been tasked with translating instruments and being able to really reflect out to audiences the sounds of different musical instruments that we're lifting up that maybe the audience wouldn't have known had we not embodied that. Really does feel like these words are something that she is really in conversation with Mark on, and I've really sort of observed Fran's choreography to really hold Wendy's body and Mark's words in such a synergistic way that they have to be in conversation with one another because they also are so different on stage. And they come from such different experiences. And so you see a collision of that. And I think that felt really exciting and so new for Wendy and for Mark. He's like, he also comes from a dance background, but he's like, but it's Wendy Whalen. So, I know she inspired so much of his writing as well. And so she's absolutely written throughout the pieces. And there'll be certain ones that I think really sort of shine out more than others where you see her influence that's really stretched across so many artistic genres. And she really is, it just feels so wonderful to have so many, personally for me, to have produced a work with such esteemed artists, Fran and Wendy and Mark and Sugar, just across the board, and just to see what could be possible And really, again, lifting up that word generosity, just how fluid we've had to be, how porous this project and process has had to be, which I think has also pushed us across our own boundaries and what we believed could be achieved with something like this.
That's one of the reasons, everything you've just said, that it feels like such a great fit for our Synergy initiative. And that's something, for those of you who don't know, it's produced by Clara Wusai and Inon Barnatan. And it really is an initiative that celebrates this cross-collaboration and bringing different art forms together to create something totally new. So I think it's a perfect fit for that. Fran, can you talk a little bit about the music? I actually got to hear a little snippet yesterday. I was spying on a rehearsal, and I'm really excited about it. But what has, kind of that process been like, and how has it evolved from the familiar Carnival of the Animals into what it is today?
Well, I know that Mark originally worked with the original score and had been working on some other projects, and so he had some familiarity with it. And I think all of us have an admiration and for classical music. I mean, ballet was my first love, also too, in dance, and so there's a real reverence that we have for that. That's the original score. But we're also all of us, and including our composer Sugar Vendale. We're a little radical, just a little bit. So, there was this opportunity for us to really think about what we wanted to share and what we wanted to say. I think politically as well as emotionally. And so that was something that was very much kind of at the forefront of the work. So we had Sugar responding to that with her electronics and her original compositions that also incorporate the live musicians. And so that's how it worked. Mark, it really was centered, and I will say, around Mark's poems. And, Wendy felt it was very important for her to, that basically his poetry is like a score with the rhythms and with the subject matter. So that there have been just so many aspects that to the music, the poetry, the classical music, the electronics, and we just kind of let ourselves again be porous, as you so eloquently said, Chisa, and we created this work. I think I've been choreographing and creating for so long that to really make space for artists to be fully embodied and fully dedicated to the moment and the work and passionate about it is very important. So to take that time, that's what I really do, is facilitate that space and that room for everyone to make contributions, and I almost serve as a designer in a way. So I like to refer to myself sometimes as a choreographic designer. So that's the music is really it's a big variety of what I shared with you, those three elements. Mm-hmm.
Let's dive a little bit into the subject that will be part of the but a part of the performance on Friday. Chisa, can you talk a little bit about what it has evolved into and what the audience can expect to see?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a sort of dramatic time, I think, for the human species, for the world in the past several years, having gone through, we're still not out of it in terms of a pandemic, and what we're specifically experiencing in this country, what we're experiencing on a global scale, both as people, as an environment, as a world. And this work did not escape being influenced by those experiences, and really is a reflection of what we're surviving. So there are aspects of, I know, as Mark was talking about the process of writing, how deeply grief is part of his untangling and his metabolizing of the moment, as we do through moving everything through our bodies. And so it's been really fascinating to see how that work is also then needing to reflect and hold this moment. And Mark is very clear. He lived just down the street in DC when the January 6th, 2021 insurrection happened. And he is a Black man living in the United States, and that is such a huge part of his story. It's not all he is, but influences so much of the poems. And so the new pieces started to come out that really were a response. How was he going to respond to this moment? And then he brought it to us and said, this feels really important, that I can't escape this as being something that is gravitationally pulling us, and now we're orbiting around this moment, and not because of just the singular event, but more because it was about inviting us all to live in the questions, live in the question of the theory and the practice of democracy, which is not an inevitable act. We have to participate in it. And so much of this and the poems feel like they're taking us in a pathway of asking, who are we? And who do we want to become? And what does democracy mean if it's something that we still have to do all the time? And so it is political without being about a political party, but as the political is personal, the personal is political. So that is very much infused in this work. And we just, as all creators, just leaned in and said yes, and kept going with that.
I actually have a quote from Mark that I wanted to read. He said, "I don't have the luxury of making art that doesn't bleed or sweat or cry. I write in response to the prevailing cultural rhythms of the day." And I think that's exactly what you're speaking to, Chisa. I think January 6th was sort of one of those timestamp moments for everyone in the country and maybe even in the world. Do you two remember where you were that day? Can you share a little bit about your thoughts on when that happened?
I know I was with my daughter over there, Harper Cohen. I think we were at home. Yeah, and I do remember witnessing it on the television, and then calling friends, and just in a state of shock. And yeah, it's interesting to revisit the work, and you'll see moments embodied that include my experiences, which I think was really wonderful. That this was also a ritual for us in a way to really pour our grief out and express and hold each other and empathize. So yeah, we really used the piece as a tool to revisit these memories and infuse them into the work. Yeah, that's where I was.
Chisa, how about you?
Yeah, I was at home as well, I think. I mean, it was 2021, and so we were still so early on, I think, had not had any vaccines, had not come out, or had just started to have the musings of it. And so I think there was just a deep questioning of what was happening in the world. And I do remember being at home, working from home. But it was, I think the habit of just business as usual got completely obliterated that day. And I think the last time I felt like I had such a timestamp moment was September 11th, 2001, where I distinctly remember that as well as a high school student. And what that could have meant at that time, and sort of the trajectory that sort of sent, I think, all of our lives into at that time. So it is interesting, as as I was talking with my mother about it, and the sort of her being like, I remember where I was for the moon landing. There's like these moments that really do sort of stand out. But then I think as creators, it did feel like a moment of not to process immediately, but when will that happen? It felt really important that also was part of the witnessing of, and now what? What does this mean for democracy? What does this mean? It felt so fragile. And I think in that fragility, sometimes with the work, as reflective as it is of the time, I think maybe sometimes gets mistaken that it leans toward trauma or it leans toward pain, where so much of this process has been about leaning toward freedom and really questioning, what does liberation look like for all of us? But it's through going through the swamp of all of these feelings and the untangling that I don't know if we're actually trying to answer in this work, and I think that's probably too big of a lift of any work to take on. But it's definitely an invitation that if we can be in that sort of mud together, kind of working through it, what if on the other side is vitality? And I think that that's more of what we're asking as we're approaching this through the darkness. Do we build that light together? And maybe this is that moment to answer that, however we do.
Fran, what do you think, from your perspective, makes that day and this work so relevant right now?
I mean, the word liberation, Chisa, when you say that word, I mean, to have an opportunity to create a work that can lift, that can bring hope to others after we have really been through such traumatizing moments, between the pandemic and January 6th. So I think, just seizing that opportunity is important and huge. And I think all of us, like I said, I remember being in the rehearsal with Wendy and her just listening to some of Mark's words and just saying, yes, to be in a group of artists and to be collaborating with, courageous human beings. And that for me is just, it gives me momentum, and it gives me hope and courage, and just that experience and that act in itself. So I'm hoping that it will resonate and that others will feel that as well.
Do you think these are the right art forms to come together for this work? I mean, there's probably no wrong art form, because I think all art is very healing, but can you talk about the interaction between the different forms and how that's been so important?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think we realized immediately when Wendy and Mark, as you said, Chisa, that they're so different, just culturally and even in who they are as artists. But there was such a commonality. And I think that distinction, especially with the political work, is so important, that you see not only the alignment and the camaraderie, but also the differences. And they're both very courageous in sharing that side of who they are with the work. So I think that is a very powerful element in the work. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Who do you think really needs to see this work? That's a big one, sorry.
Allison. Gosh, I know with any sort of live performance, it is self-selection. People will gravitate toward maybe the things that automatically resonate for them. So I would hope that if people had a pause and wondered if they should come see it, that when there is doubt, there is no doubt. Like, please just come and experience this. This is new for us as well. We're so deep in the learning of this, and we'll hopefully take it to several other communities around the country, if not globally, just to keep staying in this conversation, just to see where this work itself will evolve and continue to sort of deepen like a fine wine. And this is just the beginning of everything. So I think it's interesting, though, with Carnival, the Animals in the title, it does sort of hearken to the kid show version, that this does feel so much more grown up and feels, I mean, not to say don't bring children, but just the topic itself feels like it really drops you down into your spine. And so I think there's not who should come see it, but the experience of embody it with us. That where did the words and the movements and the music land in your physical body? As we're talking about the difficulties, also hoping to invite the possibility of what does it mean to create beauty and grace and be an example of fearlessness in this time. So if any of that resonates at any level on us, in ourselves or people that you're having conversations with, you should probably come and see the show. So, but yeah, it is an invitation to be embodied with us on this journey.
And let's jump back to the creative process a little bit. So you're here in La Jolla. Wendy arrived last night, I believe. Mark is arriving today. What's happening? Can you share a little bit about what you're doing over the next few days to prepare to Friday?
Chisa and I are working hard. That's what's happening.
We are working hard. For people who've been in sort of a technical residency, we've had such the honor of being so wonderfully supported by La Jolla Music Society here as a co-commissioner of this work, being part of the Synergy series, and we've been able to be in the venue for extended hours to just build the universe. I don't know if I ever imagined growing up I could say that that's what I would essentially do for a living, but that's what we are doing. And Fran and our lighting designer and our assistant choreographer, we were late into the night in the venue just seeing the lights, seeing the universe for the first time. What does it feel like? Because we know as audience members, we're responsible for everything you are witnessing, everything you're hearing and seeing as you're in that space with us. And so this week is both technical residency, but also the first time we're stitching everything together. So we are hyper alert and focused and nervous, and which is great because I think we can never not be on our legs. So that'll be an interesting test for us.
As Chisa says that though, but I was looking through something that Wendy shared earlier today and realized we've been working on it for 5 years. So that was interesting for me, even last night, with kind of looking at the technical elements. We didn't have Wendy or Mark in the space. My daughter Harper and Tim Stickney, who's been helping me, were there as bodies in the space. But we have such substantial kind of works that have been created already that it just flowed in a way. And we just kept saying, oh, and then that could work there. And then, I mean, of course, biting our fingernails the whole time, but and we finished on time. And I thought, okay, well, there we go. And here's the layout, and we'll give it to them. And, so it's really the work. I really know the work now, and I feel intimate with the work in a way because we've been living with it for 5 years. And there are moments that I just know. I see Wendy dancing in my head, even when we don't have anyone on stage, So I think the work feels so rich. And that's what we're really excited to share with everyone. Mm-hmm.
How much time have you had with Wendy leading up to this? And even as a full group together, have you shared a space, or this really is the first full coming together?
We've had a few activations where we've been able to get together. These are behemoth organization schedules that we're trying to balance with Ailey, City Ballet, and Kennedy Center. So, just a small little thing we're doing. So it has been incredibly challenging because there's such great work that each of these individuals are also brewing and marinating out into the world. And so it has been this balance of being able to find really focused time, if it was 4 days, 2 days, even 1 day, with the level of years and expertise collectively of this group has been more, if it wasn't about the amount of time, was the quality of that time, and really being able to focus and honor that this is just the beginning of the journey for our performers to be embodied. There's a way that I think from a technical standpoint, we can be in the booth and calling all of the lighting cues that we also want to get right, but there's also a whole step for these performers to feel much more confident and have their own ownership over these moments, that they will discover new things every single show. So this is, again, the beginning of just that first discovery and that newness. And so it really feels like we're on a journey of a bespoke performance every single time it happens. But yes, we're hoping to have a lot more in-person time in the fall as we then go into another technical residency with more lights, lighting and development in January of 2024. And we are slotted for April 6th, 2024 in Seattle at Mini Center for the official world premiere of the work. So we are rapidly getting there.
That's amazing. And do you have plans for where it goes after the Meany Center? Are there a couple of things lined up?
Yes. So La Jolla Music Society is a co-commissioner. Our lead commissioner is Meany Center in Seattle. An early commissioner was Lincoln Center, so the New York home will be there in fall of 24. Harris Theater in Chicago is also on board, as well as the Wharton Center on the Michigan State University campus, and Stanford has come on as a commissioner as well. So we're hoping if you've got any friends in like Boston or Miami or Dallas, we would love to take it to some of these other markets, and especially to any cities in the South. That tends to be, I know, a more fraught landscape for maybe more politically charged work, but we definitely want to bring this to as many communities as possible, so it is an invitation to all.
Wonderful. Well, we're so excited to have the, kind of preview here, and we're very honored to have you all at the Conrad to be doing this work. So thank you so much. We can open it up to questions if anyone has a question. Yes. So the question is, what were you thinking of yourself at 5 years old? And how did you get from 5 years old to here when you weren't necessarily seeing representation of yourself in different places and people of the same skin tone in different places?
Great parents. My mother, I will say, she grew up in Chicago and she wanted to be a dancer, and ended up leaving my father, moving to New York City, and getting a scholarship at the Martha Graham School. But she really loved teaching, so then I would go, and she started teaching at Alvin Ailey. So I would go with her to the studio, and I basically was enveloped by the Alvin Ailey community at a very young age. I was around 2 or 3. So I would go and I'd be in this space that felt I could be my full self, and that, Blackness was centered in that space for me. So for me, and then that I felt supported as an artist and as a young girl, and very much, encouraged to go and live my dreams and find my dreams and keep working hard. And then when I would fall and falter, I could go back and had this community really encouraging me in the dance world. And my father was also a civil rights lawyer. So for me, it was embedded at a young age that I could make a difference with whatever I chose to do. And so that really stayed with me. And then I really had support from my mother, who was very much also a feminist. So it was like the time for me, growing up in the 60s, around the 60s and 70s, was just fortuitous because there were so many people in the world like speaking out. And that was really something I admired and was very much a part in surrounding me as a young person. So that became my dream to even this is a dream, being able to work on something that I feel has a political message. And so that's where it started. It started at a very young age, and I didn't see necessarily representation on television, but that wasn't my goal necessarily. I really thought the theater and seeing Alvin Ailey and seeing people of color, embodied so gracefully, and really gave me courage. Judith Jamison was a very famous dancer for Alvin Ailey, and I'm very tall, and she was just unapologetic with the way she took the stage, and I thought if she could do it, then I can do it. And so I feel very fortunate to have grown up in that community, and that's really wonderful to be back and just empower this new generation to continue to know how beautiful they are and how successful they can be. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I can briefly speak to that. I come from a multicultural background. Both my parents were born in Japan, but I also have French, Irish, and Cherokee in my background. And I do believe, though, that I come from a lineage of women that didn't have a lot of choices. And my grandmother, it was, during the occupation of after World War II, had come to the United States. And really, it feels like my inheritance is the abilities that they never had the chance to do. And so I believe as a creator, I don't have, I do have a lot of artists sort of in my past. I am still looking for them in terms of what they've left behind, sculptors and calligraphists and poets back in Japan. But a lot of my lineage now does feel like, how do I use their bravery that got them to the point that they could survive so that I'm at a place now that I can build a world that does reflect back what I believe is in my heart, what is in the hearts of the people in all of these different communities. How do I advocate for that and also continue to build voice around that? And so, especially as a producer, it feels like that's how I'm absolutely leaning toward my own intuition in terms of how do I curate art that always centers that and centers impact and meaning, which hopefully does help still fill people's fridges and puts gas in their tanks and has money in their bank accounts. And so I do hope that that continues to change as well, that equity and an equitable living is possible for creators in this country. So if I get to be a part of that as well, and that is also a part of my legacy, I will strive to that.
Any other questions? Yes. So really quick before you answer, the question is, it's too soon with this work because it's brand new, but when you've worked on a piece and you keep doing it and doing it and doing it, how do you keep it fresh? And perhaps Revelations could be a good example to draw on, or I'm sure you have a million examples to draw on.
Oh, I mean, I think always revisiting and repurposing, I feel, in a way, always bringing new questions into the room. Because I think evolution and work is constantly evolving. So even we will have our performance today, and then Wendy will have some responses, and Mark too, and we'll go back into the studio and we'll discover, and I'm sure Inon and the musicians, and we'll be able to look at it for the first time. So it's just always evolving and always changing. And it's important, those considerations for all of the collaborators and for all of the performers, and even just the aesthetics, like talking about the costumes. What are they wearing? And does it work? What does that say? Does it represent the people and that we're describing in the work? So I mean, there's so many elements that just keep it fresh, and it's just continuing to commit to like those details. I think the details are really just what make a work really rich. What are we missing? Little tweaks. Mm-hmm. All the time, yes. Mm-hmm. Which is great. I mean, I think that's what's wonderful about this work. And some, I guess, maybe some commercial theater works, I think about that, they lock a performance at a certain point. But for a piece like this, it's just, you have to keep it open so that there's breath and there's fluidity. And there might be some new events that happen, that we respond to or we add into the work. So I think that's really important, that we keep that fluidity alive.
Yes. So the question is that he wanted to confirm if he's heard correctly that this week's presentation on Friday, is that a full-length presentation but it's still in development, and just could you clarify sort of what we'll be seeing and where it'll go?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually did stitch, I think, the majority of the show together, at least as we were mapping from a lighting perspective. So this will actually be a full-length evening. There's no intermission to this work, but part of our work in terms of the poems is perhaps if we're not able to clarify all of the transitions and really sort of connect all of the threads between each of the poems, there might be a sense energetically of these like very poignant vignettes throughout the evening, but it will be a full-length evening work that will continue as we see it all on one canvas. We'll understand where are the pieces that are now missing a little bit, and we wouldn't have known that had we not actually sort of risen to the creative challenge of seeing it all. So it will be a full evening length work, and we're discovering it. We just had a musical meeting with Inon as well before we came into the discussion to say, okay, they're going to try some other music pieces. They're rehearsing today in the venue. Maybe this will sound good. So we actually have like sort of a menu of options in some of these sections that we'll be able to try out in rehearsal for the next few days before we actually present. So yeah, whatever those decisions are will be for what we do at this version, but I can see how a lot of it will actually carry on with us. But there are a few poems that I believe will still be written that are not ready to drop in now, but are going to be part of the identity as it goes forward.
Well, Francesca and Chisa, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you all for joining us. I hope that you are planning to attend on Friday. It's going to be an amazing night. And I'm so grateful for your time and your energy. Thank you so much.